Well, hello everybody and a very warm welcome to this week's video. This week's video is video number 3 in the Business DNA Programme. Now, as the name suggests, it's the third in the series, the 12-part Business DNA series. So I'm going to assume in producing this video that you have watched videos 1 and 2, because it is a series and it makes most sense if you watch them together in a series, otherwise you won't get the right information from them. And we're producing one of these every week for the next 12 weeks. So as I say, I'm going to assume that you've watched the other videos. If you haven't watched videos 1 and 2, look below this video and you'll see information for how you can do that, and it would make sense to watch those two before you look at today's video. But as I say, today is the third step, and this is actually a step that we didn't used to have this in the original program. The first program we put together on this theme a couple of years ago, we didn't have this step. This step was slightly different, and we amalgamated a few of the other steps to include this, because this is essentially, too big, if you will. Because if you look at last week and what we looked at in video number 2, it was all about a USP and a point of difference. And I said that forget all of the stuff you read in business books, other than my business books. Forget all of the sort of theoretical stuff that suggests how Coca-Cola do this and McDonald's do this, but actually figure out that how could a small business do this? How could a business, small, medium-sized business, anything up to a couple, maybe 10, 20 million from a startup, anything from 1 staff to maybe a few hundred staff. How could a business like that do it? Not how does it work for Coca-Cola and sponsoring the Olympics, which is all very good and all very good business theory, but doesn't help, any business that's under, probably a promotional budget of $1 billion or more a year. And nobody listening to this has that budget, I assume, unless Coca-Cola have joined, which I'll be very pleased if they have, but I doubt it. So, it's kind of saying forget all the business book theory about, looking at what McDonald's and what Coca-Cola do and figure out if that's what they could do, how could I do that as a very small business? Now, that's all well and good, and there's a lot of information in that video. But what used to happen is people always used to say, okay, I get it. I understand how I can do it. I used to think it was just for Coca-Cola. Now I understand how I could apply the principles to a small business so I can have, great success without having that £1 billion budget every year. However, I've got a load of questions. I'm not sure what you mean about this. I'm not sure what you mean about that. I'm not sure what you mean about the other. So what we actually did is we pulled together the 10 questions that we're asked the very most about creating a USP and creating a point of difference and a compelling reason why we should trade with your business over every other business. Because to briefly recap what I said last week, I said that there's lots of different businesses in your marketplace, competitors of yours, and if you don't give people a compelling reason, what I call a point of difference, a unique selling point, a unique selling proposition, a reason why they should trade with you, then there's no good reason to trade with you than to all of your other competition. So on a good day, you'll end up with a fair share of all of the business that's happening in your marketplace. But good days don't really happen in business. There isn't really a randomality or fairness. It tends to be that 1 or 2 people, through all sorts of reasons, get most of the business and you're left with the scraps. That's what I call a Me Too business. The only way to overcome that is creating this compelling difference, this point of difference. We explored all of that last week and exactly how you do it. So if you're tempted to skip this phase and just say, well, I'm just a plumber, or I'm just a stationery supplier, or I'm just a lawyer, and we're the same as everybody else in town, then I implore you to watch last week's video, become convinced of the theory of why you need to do this, and then in the process of creating it, look at all of these different questions, which I've deliberately framed to small and medium-sized businesses, the type of businesses I mentioned in my introduction, and how you can apply it. So without any further ado, let's have a look at question number 1. And then we'll go through these point by point. Question number 1 says, does the difference have to be unique? I think this is a bit of a misnomer because of the point of unique selling point. And that's generally, I like to call it a point of difference because I think it's more accurate to what it is. Because it doesn't have to be unique. Now, if you can do something that is truly unique, if that's not a tautology, if you can get something which is, genuinely unique, factually unique, then brilliant. However, the chances are you might not. You might just become very rare. Or you might become, as I explored last week, the person that can do something which is unique in an industry. So remember when I said it might be hard for you to come up with a USP for the whole of the marketplace, but maybe you can pick a particular segment and you can do what I call the speciality theory. Look at last week's video for how to do that. So you can be unique in a particular industry. But let's say there are 33,000 legal practices in the UK. Maybe that means there's a couple of 100,000 internationally. And let's say you can do what only 500 people in the world are doing, and maybe only 50 people in the UK are doing. I would say that class is as unique enough. I'd still probably follow that speciality and I'd apply it to a different industry. But if your point of difference puts you in I would say a top, say 5%. Now I think that means if my maths are still good, that means you're 1 in 20. I'd probably say that's a bare minimum. That's a prerequisite for something being a point of difference. As I say in my opening, if you can be unique, brilliant. But, you know, the longer we go on in business, the harder it is to be completely unique, particularly if we're not following the speciality sort of niche model. So I would say it doesn't have to be unique, but I would be looking at 1 in 20. And if you can pick up, let's say you're a business, you know, I'm recording this office in Durham today, in our Durham office. If you can be the only business in Durham, say legal practice that's doing it, but there's 1 or 2 people doing it, you know, in the north of England, maybe 1 in Manchester and 1 in Newcastle, a couple of people in London, a few more dotted around the UK, and you were, like I say, a legal practice, and there were, you know, a couple, you know, well, yeah, 30-odd thousand in the UK, I consider that unique enough. So kind of look at it in those terms. The more unique it can be, the better. The more you can specialise, the better. But don't get absolutely hung up on unique selling proposition, because not that many things are unique. Here's another interesting point as well. For some clients, we have created over the years USPs that we truly thought were unique. And we did some very good research. And the people I have that do our research are very kind of bright graduates that are very skilled at research, very good at sort of market research. We couldn't find anyone else that were doing it. We applied for a patent and all the rest, blah, 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 blah. We get to the point where a year later, we figure out somebody else is doing what we thought was unique. So then, you know, we speak to the lawyers and we say, we've got a patent, blah, blah, blah. And what happens is they say, oh no, these people were doing it before you. Fortunately, they didn't apply for patents and that sort of stuff, so we're legally protected and we can all do it. But they were doing it before we were doing it, or the client in particular, and we didn't know. So even when you believe you're truly unique, you're probably not, because there might be somewhere in Malaysia doing it and you just don't know. Obviously, if you're a tech business, patents become significantly more important. If you're a service business, then, you know, it's very difficult to get the copyright from an idea. It has to be something within a process. So you know, you don't need to worry about patents. I'm not suggesting you need to go to a patent lawyer and get a patent for your USP. I'm just saying that even when we've done all the due diligence and applied and got it, you still sometimes find that somebody else was doing it before you. And you know, I think technically in patent law you still can prevent them, but it's probably not in the spirit of it. But the point I'm illustrating is even when you believe you're unique, you're not necessarily unique. So in summary, the more unique you can be, the better. I would say an acid test of 1 in 20, so you can be in the top 5%. Top 1% would be even better. And if you can be true to that, fantastic. Although consider the speciality theory, because if you follow that process, you probably can be unique within that small industry sector. So that's question number 1. Okay, question number 2 is naturally related to that. How different is different enough? Well, if we look at the theory of a USP, it fundamentally says, in creating a point of difference, we need to be sufficiently different to meet an unmet want, need, or desire of our target market. An unmet want, need, or desire of our target market. So if that's what we need to do, then how different becomes a bit of an academic argument. If everybody else, I'm going to use that legal example just because it's in my head, but if everybody else in the legal sector is producing wills in exactly the same way, and you just decide there's one difference you can apply, but it satisfies the acid test of being an unmet want, need, or desire of your target market, well, it's different enough. The fact that 99% of it's the same, but 1% difference makes all the difference, that's absolutely fine. You know, to win the 100-metre sprint, you only need to be 0.01 second ahead of the competition. And what does the winner get compared to the person in second place? Second place is first loser. They don't get any of the fame, any of the fortune, or anything like the level of fame and fortune. And it's the same in business. The smallest of advantages can be huge. Now, for instance, if you look, I mentioned McDonald's before, if you look at the difference between McDonald's, KFC and Burger King, it isn't that great. However, there's a couple of things they do which are better, in my personal opinion, just so the lawyers are happy and we don't get sued for any comments in this video. But in my opinion, they're not quite as good, because McDonald's do a couple of things differently. Very minorly differently, but when you extrapolate that across every single customer experience, every single day, of every single week, of every single year, over a long time period, it makes a dramatic difference. So don't think in terms of being different. Think in terms of satisfying a hitherto unsatisfied, unmet want, need, or desire. And if that's what you can do and put a tick in that box, that's different enough. So, the difference is almost not important. Like I say, 0.01% can make all of the difference in this sort of stuff. So long as it's satisfied the acid test of the unmet need, want, or desire, then you're perfectly good. So think in terms of meeting customer needs, not in terms of being different, just because on some continuum of difference, you can be significantly different. Sometimes, actually, it can be a disadvantage as well, because you can say, we're completely different to everybody else, and people might say, oh, well, I don't want someone completely different, I just want someone that does what everybody else does, but you do some stuff differently, or you do some stuff better, or you've got something unique, or something rare, or something different. So sometimes when I read some websites, I'm going to stick with that legal example, and they go, we're not like any other lawyer. And I say, well, I probably want you to be a bit like the other lawyers, but there are some things I want you to do differently. And if you can convince me that you're like everybody else, but you do a couple of things differently, and or you got a solid USP, then that's probably what I want. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater is probably the maxim that I can use in that respect. Okay, then the third question. This is something I get asked probably more than any of the other questions, even though it's a bit of an academic legal point. And I will have that caveat, I'm not a copyright or a patent lawyer, so if you have a genuine concern that somebody's copied your ideas, then you obviously need to seek legal advice. Although I will tell you that our intellectual copy gets copied at least once every single week, and in today's digital world there's not so much you can do about it. So there are some realities when it's just not worth pursuing the legal difference. I would say if somebody has copied your point of difference, because the question is, what happens if somebody copies your point of difference? Well, what happens is they copy it, obviously. They might not copy it as well as you, they might not apply it as well. But you've got to look at legal protection, as I mentioned there. And as I say, sometimes we've had people who've breached our copyright or breached our intellectual property, and you look at it, and step number one is to stop them from doing it. And you can nearly always stop them from doing it without going to court. You might be able to personally ask them to stop doing it, or you might ask your lawyers to do that, and they will do it. But the vast majority of people, 99% of people, will stop doing something on your request when you point out that you own the intellectual property. So step number one, if you find out somebody copies it, what happens is they copy it. Well, let's stop them in the least expensive way possible, because you making the request or your lawyers making the request is going to cost you, let's say £500. Whereas if it goes to step number two, and somebody is still breaching your intellectual copy, and your lawyers say there is a case, because sometimes there isn't a case, sometimes they've clearly stolen it, but there's not very much you can do because they've made subtle differences. And as I said before, if it's just an idea or just a theme that you've got, you really need to try and convert that into a process that you can copyright. Like our business DNA process is, there's an intellectual property because we put that into a process. So you need to work with somebody to do that if it's suitable. The best thing you can do is have an expert consultation. Most intellectual property and patent lawyers will do that free of charge, and will just go through it with you and look at your legal situation and what sort of protection you may have. Sometimes you can't protect these ideas, as I say. Now, if you really are in that position, either trying to proactively protect your ideas, or you want to reactively deal with somebody who's copied it, then do let me know, and I can recommend people who are very skilled in that field. But I would say an initial request for somebody to stop doing it usually works. If not, you can consider legal action, or in the first case, you consider some sort of compensation for what they're doing, and your lawyers will be able to advise you whether that will work or not. However, there is a bit of a business reality here. That they say that even patents and intellectual property only slows down the competition. It doesn't stop you. The very classic example that's used is a treadmill, and somebody devised a treadmill, and you'd imagine it's very unique. However, the patents were there. I think there was 27 patents on the original, but it still didn't stop people doing it because they find a different way of doing it. So if you look in terms of patents in intellectual property, it only slows people down. It doesn't stop them. And it's always also probably an inevitability if you operate in a large enough marketplace that somebody will try and do this. So protection is the first step, and then legal action, but also an acceptance that I think if you create a USP, I generally think give it 3 years and then somebody else will be doing it. It might be more, it might be less, but if you say 36 months, I think every 36 months you probably need to be looking at doing something differently. Or if you do something consistently, brilliantly, time after time after time, even when the competition start to copy you, you've already got first mover advantage, you've already got the brand advantage, you've already got the revenue that's generated, which give you cash positives, and you can push forward in a lot more aggressive fashion, so you can maybe stick to your USP. McDonald's is probably a good example of doing that, where they don't need to modify, because first mover advantage means that you start 10 yards in the 100-meter sprint ahead of everybody else, and they'll just never catch you up. So, except that in 36 months, people might be copying and either innovate and come up with something different. It's probably applicable to service businesses, or if it's a product type business, you probably, like I say, if you can continue and get that first mover. Again, it does depend, because if you're talking about a USP for a mobile phone, that's completely different to a legal service. The legal service might last you a little bit longer, and you'll identify other ways. So I guess what I'm saying is you can take recourse to legal action, and that can be effective, or you can try and remove it yourself, but fundamentally accept that people will copy you. The more successful you are, the more people will try and get you, the more people will try and undermine what you're doing. That's why a lot of people will tell the trade how good they are and how much they're better, and they give away a lot of their secrets. Sometimes it's better to stay under the radar, but accept that you either need to see people coming and innovate and do something differently, or you need to really have a strategy that's focused around first mover advantage and just gain that initial momentum that you got, or combine the two, of course. So that's that one. I would say for most small, medium-sized businesses, particularly ones that are copying the specialization model, I would say that the most important is to actually start on this process and create something, and then worry about the legal protection and that sort of stuff. Obviously, the more truly unique something you're getting, and this goes back to question number one, the more truly unique it actually is, the more difficult it will be for people to copy. For instance, I think I used in last week's video the money-saving expert Martin Lewis as an example of this, but he's created a human USP. Now, somebody might copy his model, but he's got a first mover advantage, but he's also got some very unique personal skills. He's got a unique charisma, and he's got a unique style of delivery. It's very difficult to overcome that. Whereas if you're a tech company, at some point somebody will build the same software as you. But if you can do it around a human, it's a lot more difficult for people to copy. So hopefully that gives you some food for thought. Obviously, I'm making this very general, and I'm trying to touch as many bases as I possibly can. But I would say in most cases, let's get on with it. Let's create something. Let's test it in the marketplace. When we know it works, then let's seek legal stuff and protect it. But number one is business advantage. And even if your advantage lasts 36 months and then you need to innovate again, they would still be a massively profitable 36 months for you, because if you truly can become in the top 5%, the top 1%, the top 0.1% of any industry, and you break that Me Too mold, and you become a truly different organisation that people really want to trade with, and you satisfy an unmet want, need or desire, the revenue you'll generate in that period will take you to a whole new level. You'll probably get to the point where you become so successful you can hire very clever people who can worry about this, and it's a very nice situation to be in. I have it at the minute where, at any one time we have a couple of very bright people worrying about stuff like this and innovating, and you almost get to the point where, what is it they say, be great yourself and have an even greater team. You can delegate that, and you can have somebody that's worrying about that and innovating for you, because with any business, success becomes financial resources which fuel every other resource in your business. And sometimes a first mover advantage can be an advantage, even if it isn't just because you're persisting through that market game that you have, even if it's just because it takes you to a whole new level as a business and you can afford to do stuff on a different level. So that's that question. Now, this is a really good question. This says, is just being different good enough in order to make you stand out for being different? No. And some people do this. I have been told by people who quite proudly say, oh, I've created this USP. We're different. And I'll say, okay, how are you different? And they go, well, we've got a pink brand. And I'm going to stick with this legal practice. Sorry to legal people who are watching this. Sounds like I'm sort of overly focusing on you and maybe being slightly critical in the comment I'm about to make. But it's general to every sector. But they say, well, every other legal brand is boring, and they all go for red and blue and green and all grey. We've gone for pink, so everything we do as a practice is pink. So we've got pink wallpaper and a pink website and pink pens, and we drive around in a pink car, and we stand out for being different. Now that might be a good marketing strategy, it might not, but the fact that you have distinctive branding does not make your brand distinctive in a point of difference sense. That's just good branding. And quite frankly, anybody, if they thought that pink would really resonate with their target market, could create something pink. So that, don't confuse brand colours, which is a subsection of brand image, to be your brand identity. Brand identity is what the personality of your business, what you've known for, what you do differently, what is your point of difference. Whereas brand image, in colours is literally, what colour are you? So, no, that's a very micro point. And by the way, we come on to branding. I think it's chapter number 6. So number 6 in this series. We come on to branding and we look at some of the jargon I've just mentioned there in a bit more detail. But don't confuse being different with actually having a value. Let me explain that in kind of technical terms. If you are that legal practice and you've got the pink stuff, for some reason, my computer's just jumped off that question. Come back again. There we are. Yes, as I say, to put it in technical terms, if you've got the legal practice where everything's pink, I would say the whole point of difference would be to satisfy, as I say, the unmet want, need, or desire of your industry. And unless they wanted pink lawyers, which to my knowledge they don't, it's OCOs. It's not actually a point of difference. So don't fall into the trap of being different. More people do this than you might imagine. It's a shortcut and it's flawed, and actually, rather than being a shortcut in the long run, it slows you down. So don't do that. An example of where being pink might work is, for instance, Sheila's Wheels Insurance. I've featured them before in a video, because I think the way they promote their business is very effective. Unfortunately, because of a European Union change, they said you can't differentiate technically on gender, which seems unfair because statistically men crash more cars than women, so it seems unfair that women have to pay the same rates as men. But that's what the European court ruled, rightly or wrongly. So Sheila's Wheels was a brand, as you probably know, that was designed around insurance just for women. Why? Well, half of that was because women should stick together and it's girl power, and why do stuff with stuffy, boring men? Well, that's good, because there's a certain subsection of women that like that. It's a subsection that don't. But there's a very clear subsection who believe in girl power and say, yeah, why should we, why should we give money to men and make men profit? Why shouldn't we do, a kind of girls only brand? So it worked from that perspective. The other half was saying, well, girls have different needs, because girls, generally speaking, I'm stereotyping here, I do apologise, but, in branding and marketing and business, we do have to stereotype when we're doing this sort of stuff. But women tend not to race around like boy racers. They tend not to go terribly fast. They tend not to pull out on people in junctions. They tend not to do overtakes that they've not got the power or the timing to do. They tend to be a lot safer. They don't have as many accidents. So we should have cheaper premiums. So it was a whole brand built around that subsection of women that like that. And that was a very pink-driven brand. It was very kind of spangly and pink and branding for that subsection of women. That worked brilliantly, because whilst the packaging was spangly and pink, the actual core business product was saying our point of difference is that women want to stick together and they want to have car insurance that is reflective of the right costs that it should be for women. Why should young girls pay more than young boys when boys smash their cars up, wrapping them around lampposts, and girls don't? That's not fair. So that was a real business difference. So I'm not saying it's the case that branding and brand identity isn't important in all of this, but it is. But that's an example of something that was represented in pink spangly bits, but it actually had a really strong business case. And I actually believe, unfortunately, because of that European Union ruling, the business was undermined. But if it didn't, I think that had all of the makings of becoming the best exemplar of how to do differentiation and how to say we're going to pick a target market and we're really going to break with tradition, break with what everybody else is doing, and do something differently. And it's a shame for them that the European Union stuff happened, but it does, and there we are. That's politics. But it was that differentiation is very strong, but represented in pink spangly bits. So don't confuse the end result with the real business polemic behind it, the real business reason, the business theory, the business philosophy. So no, being different isn't the objective. Satisfying a gap in the market that your customers want is what it's all about. Okay, the next one. This is a good question as well, actually. This says, does being different mean that you must stop doing something that you're currently doing and therefore risk making stuff worse? Now, this is a bit of a convoluted question because we get asked lots of stuff around this, but it's basically saying, let's say you're Sheila's Wheels and you're doing all of this stuff, and then you need to stop doing that in order to have another USP which appeals to boy racers. Because I dare say there's probably gap, if there wasn't that European ruling, to have a brand that says, do you drive really fast? Are you reckless? Do you try and overtake people when you shouldn't and try and wrap it around lampposts? If you do, we're the brand for you. I dare say you could do that. I don't know whether the government would be happy with you doing that, but you could do that, and that would be, Sheila's Wheels might rebrand to Dave's Wheels or something. You could do that. My response to that would be, it would make absolutely no sense for Sheila's Wheels to do that when they have a concrete USP and a concrete point of difference. That would be just foolish, because why would you stop doing something that was working? And therefore you probably would make it worse, because you'd have to do rebranding and all the rest of it. However, if Sheila's Wheels said, we've got a great point of difference here with this Sheila's Wheels brand, this works brilliantly, however, there's a gap in the market for boy racers' wheels, Dave's Wheels or whatever, so we'll do that. They'd be much better launching a whole new business around that. And I discussed this last week in Speciality and how you can have different businesses for different segments and that sort of stuff. And sometimes it's much easier to split a brand than it is to become known for two different things. I often use the Volvo example in this, where I say that Volvo were known throughout the world for being very safe. And within that, there are notions of reliability and surety and that sort of stuff. Then they started doing a load of advertising around being fast and being sporty. The problem is people would already have them as safe, and you can't go really safe but also really sporty. It would have been easier to launch a sub-brand, and you see people doing that all the time. How you apply that to a small business is, let's say you're doing something great in one demographic, but you spot the opportunity in the other one. Whatever you do, don't stop what you're doing that's really working and risk making it worse. You will make it worse, because you'll end up with a completely confused brand that appeals to so many different people. The strongest brands are the ones that have a very concrete, distinct target market and appeal just to them. So make sure that you focus on that one area, and if you have got the good idea, split the business. So do it that way. If, on the other hand, we're not talking about a business that's got a great point of difference and what you're doing isn't really working, well, I don't think you need to stop doing anything on a procedural level. You just need to either develop what you're doing or create something new that you're doing that is a USP. And if you don't have a point of difference at the minute, but you can research something and find something that genuinely is wanted in your marketplace and fulfills the unmet need acid test, then, I very much doubt it will make it worse. Obviously, this is a general video, and if you've got a specific example, drop us a line and we'll talk about it. And, there might be the rarest of examples where you could make stuff worse. But if you execute it properly and you've not got an unmet need now, but you need to change your business to satisfy meeting an unmet need that your target market wants, then you absolutely need to do that, and you won't make it worse. Here's the point about making it worse as well. You can't get much worse than a Me Too business. You can't get much worse than there being... I'll stick with lawyers, with there being 33,000 practices in the UK, and you're the same as the rest of them. Because as I say, people will either choose you randomly, or they'll go to people that might be a little bit better at marketing, or they'll go to people who might be a little bit more local, or they'll go to people, worse still, that are cheaper. You know, how could you be worse than that? That's dreadful. It's also the situation for 99.9% of businesses in the UK, but it's still dreadful. I don't care that just because everybody else does it, that's a defence. Is it a defence? It most certainly isn't a defence. There's no reason for you to be a Me Too business. So, you know, I can't find a way of how you could be worse than a Me Too business. It's absolutely dreadful. People saying, why should I use you? I could use anybody else. You've got no real reason to pull people in. They'll just compare you on price, if nothing else, or really silly factors like they like the look of your website more than somebody else. Yeah, okay, we should all have good looking websites, but it's not really business, is it? Whereas having a concrete point of difference is fantastic and will give you masses of advantages. So I don't think you could make it much worse than where you currently are. Just because 99.9% of people are in company with you, all struggling and all nowhere near realising their full potential, doesn't mean that you should feel some sort of surety in that and feel that you won't make things worse. Obviously, this is general advice, and like I say, if you're in this situation, please do share your ideas with me, and I'll probably give you some more direct personal advice that's applied to your business. But in the general sense, then no, you'll struggle to make stuff worse. And as I say, if you've got a good USP and you see another target market, do that as a whole new business. Okay, the next question. I guess I've just answered this, haven't I, really, to some extent. I should have been a bit wiser and remembered what was coming. This says, do you have to have one point of difference for the business or one for individual product or service that you provide? The simple truth of the matter is, it depends on your business and there's no right or wrong answer. For instance, I'm going to use Apple as an example, just because whilst I'm not saying you can copy Apple and do what they do, because, you know, like I said before, they've got billion-pound budgets and all the rest of it, but it's probably something you can get your head around. If you look at what Apple as a brand really stand for, they really stand for being innovative and being creative and being different and having the best ideas. From the iPod to the iPad to the iPhone, they're just really cool. They create stuff that we want to have, and, you know, even the Mac and that sort of stuff, it was innovation. So that's their central point of difference, is the fact that they're terribly creative. But for each product stroke service that they provide, each product they produce, there are unique features within. So the absolute great situation would be to satisfy all of them. However, if you can't, then it doesn't matter. So it's one of those ones that it does depend on the business type, but really, I would say that if your product and service are for the same target market, you can get away with the process of the whole business. But it'd be even better if the business is known for something, but each product and service has a unique point to it as well. Remember what I said about using a guarantee as a USP? Like, or if all else fails, why not guarantee it? It'd be great if you could guarantee a USP rather than just a general point. But, you know, go back to last week's video, and if nothing else, let's say you have a real point of difference as a business, and you just have a simple guarantee for every product being a bit of point of difference. It's cheating a little bit, but it's still better than 99.9% of people. So I would say it's one of those ones. If it's just for the business, fine. But if you can have one for every product, better still. But the more the merrier, really, is the response to that. Now, to pick up what I've just said, and I'm not going to repeat word for word what I just said before, but basically what I said before is, if you've got a product or service that you're currently serving, but you have another idea that will appeal to another segment, then you should create a new business. Now, I'm not going to talk about the technical stuff about whether that's the same company or whether you do it as trading styles. You know, if you're in that position, then speak to your advisors or speak to me or whatever, and, you know, we can give you the kind of the technical stuff. But fundamentally, that should be a different business name, a different phone number, a different website, and everything else. So if it is something which is, you know, a multiplication, if you will, within the same area, so the insurance company, and it's doing this segment and that segment, but a whole new business is the better way to go. So hopefully that's food for thought on that one. Okay, this is something I'm asked an awful lot again. This is I guess all of these questions are popular, but this is particularly prevailing. It says, if nobody is currently doing it being the USP that you're considering creating, doesn't that mean that nobody wants it, especially in a mature industry? Okay, there's two ways to respond to this question. I'll tackle the latter one first, about the mature industry. Well, I mentioned legal ones there. Now, law is, what, 500 years old or whatever. It's one of the oldest professions, one of the oldest business models. And, you know, the amount of commoditization and Me Too businesses is incredible. Are you really trying to say that people are happy with lawyers, people are happy with legal firms? You walk into a pub or whatever and say, I need a lawyer for X. Does anybody know a good one? Or what do you think about lawyers for X? You see what response you get. So it's a mature industry, and people think the standard's pretty low or pretty average or pretty indifferent and indistinct from everybody. So in a mature industry, if anything happens, everybody starts to copy everybody else. So I'd say sometimes, this is a generalization, but in some industries, you're better being mature than and innovating than being in a brand new industry, because brand new industries tend by their very nature to attract more innovative and creative people, whereas mature industries, it tends to be everybody does what everybody else does. I try and make some people in mature industries do stuff that's absolute standard course in other industries, and they'll fight tooth and nail with you to say that's just not what people in law do. We can't be doing this. You know, people get really wedded to industry norms. So, you know, to respond to the first point, no, mature industries is, if anything, a greater target to aim at. Secondly, you know, if nobody else is doing it, does that mean nobody else wants it? I guess you've got to look at it. I mean, if somebody's actually had your USP before and tried it, but remember what I say about climbing Everest. It's not just about trying it. You know, 10% of people that try to climb up Everest will get to the top. You know, the top 10% of those people who do summit do stuff differently to everybody else. So trying's not really the acid test. It's trying and trying properly and successfully. So if other people have tried expertly and did everything right and it still failed, then you could probably conclude, well, maybe people don't want that. You know, and there probably are examples of when people have tried that. However, a lot of the time when people try stuff, you know, timing could be wrong, the way they delivered it, the way they produce a branding, the energy they had behind it. Like I say, think about climbing up Everest. Just because two people are doing it doesn't mean that they're both going to do it the same, and the reasons for success or failure will be random. So remember that. But I would say, to sort of believe that everybody's had every good idea in that industry and we're all the same, is pretty much giving up on human innovation, isn't it? It's kind of saying, well, everyone's had every good idea about the legal practice, so nothing can change. No more good ideas can be had. Well, that clearly can't be true, is there? There's intellectual breakthroughs all the time. You take an industry like art, which people have been doing since we could physically do it, since we had the tools and the materials to do it, yet there's still innovation every year. You know, there are prizes for innovation in art, and people do it all the time. Look at literature. People write books which are different and innovate and do something differently. Well, if we can do that in lofty industries, we must be able to do that with measurable, testable, researchable business strategies. So to give up on the idea that everybody's had every good idea is to give up on the very notion of ideas themselves, and I just don't believe that's true. There's new stuff happening all the time, and realistically you need to be one of the innovators, not one of the followers. You need to not be a Me Too, but you need to be a distinctly different type of business. So so hopefully that answers that question for you. Okay, isn't a point of difference just for big businesses? Now, I tackled this last week, but I want to do it again because it's just such an important point. Remember what I said last time. The reason that every big business becomes a big business is because they used to be a small business, but they did stuff differently to everybody else, so they stopped being a Me Too business, and they gained success, momentum, market share, and are therefore big. So use the McDonald's example. The only reason they got big was because when they were small, they did what 99.9% of people weren't doing. And remember what I said last week about taking a small business, big business principles and applying them to small businesses. There's lots of ways I showed you how you could take the principles of McDonald's, where you need £1 billion of resources, and you can do it in a even a one-person business in London or whatever. So no, it's not just something for big businesses. The reason why points of differences are so much more prevalent in big businesses is because it's almost a prerequisite of being a big business that you do something differently. So The only way you can become a big business or successful business and achieve all of your goals is by doing this. If you look at how hard it is to succeed without this, it really is pushing the ball up the hill. Why not push it down the hill? It makes no sense not to do that. So no, it's absolutely not for big businesses. And I gave you, I think 13 ways last week for you to apply principles of USPs to a small and medium-sized business. So you've got no excuse. Saying, "Oh, that's just for big businesses and little old me can't do it," is just excuses. I don't want to be too harsh on people, and I know I've got to be careful when I say this. I don't want to be critical. I understand the stresses and strains of a business. I've founded several businesses. I know what it's like to be there at the coalface. I'm not just doing this from blank theory. This is kind of elbow grease advice. Hard earned. Advice. So I have been in that situation, but just to give yourself the defence that it's a little old you and that it's a big bad world out there and you couldn't possibly do it differently, it's just defeatist. As I've said before, if you're not sure how you can do in this business, we can help you. It's not as if this is unobtainable. I understand some people aren't that good at creative ideas, they're good at other stuff. Well, that's fine. We've all got strengths and weaknesses, but don't believe it's just for big businesses. The reason they're big is because they did this. It's not the other way around. It's cause and effect. Okay, I've answered this one, haven't I, really? Do you apply for a patent for your point of difference? There's more copyright stuff, there's more to intellectual property than just patents is, and there's registered trademarks as well, and there's copyright and all of these sorts of things. I would say what you've got to do is create a really good point of difference, and then you need to decide whether or not it's worth the legal activities to protect your idea. And that only comes through expert consultation. If you've got some stuff, then by all means suggest it to us and we will look at it and we'll give you some general business advice and whether or not it's worth speaking to somebody else. But it is one of those ones, and as I say, I can recommend very good intellectual property lawyers. It's really worth a consultation, because sometimes you'll find that they'll say it's almost impossible to protect this. I refer you to my comments that I made in response to the first or second question, or sometimes they'll say, yeah, of course we can protect you, and it'll be quite cost effective, or like I said before, it tends to slow people down, so it's never going to stop them forever, but it's worth doing. And you'll generally find, particularly people I can recommend you to, will be very appropriate. They won't give you the advice just to get the money out of you. It'll be a sensible, informed discussion, and sometimes they might say, if this is going to cost £100,000 to protect, because it's not so much registering patents and that sort of stuff. Don't remember, the cost comes when somebody breaches it. You ask them to stop it and they don't. You have to then, go to a court case, and that's very expensive. So I'm saying 100,000. Let's say they tell you that would be the rough cost of defence. You might decide that 100,000 would be better spent on marketing. You might not have that £100,000. It totally depends what type of business you are. If you can afford the 100,000, and by the way, I'm not saying that is the figure. I'm saying that's just an example that somebody might say you'll need 100,000 to protect this on average. And if you've got that money and it's worth it, go for it. If you haven't, well, you've not really got an alternative. If you believe it would be better used somewhere else, fine. That's the whole point of business, as I said before. As I've said many times before, the whole purpose of business is to appropriately apply your resources, and they include cash resources. So it comes back to cost-benefit analysis. No, there's nothing more grand to this than just being sensible. Okay, this is a really good question. It's not exactly one of the ones that people always consider first. That in the process of creating a point of difference, should I not start? It's more something they say to protect what they're currently doing, and I think it is. Again, I'm going to be a bit harsh, but I think this is almost motivated a bit by laziness and inertia, and not wanting to really push yourself. Because this says, can I bypass creating a point of difference simply by being better at branding, marketing, and sales? And the correct answer is yes, but you shouldn't. Why? Because your results will be magnified, let's say tenfold, by being able to market, brand, and sell something that is a genuine point of difference. There are examples of companies, I'm not going to mention names for the sake of getting into legal hot water, but there are plenty of companies out there that are only really there because they've got a first mover advantage. Back in the early days when, maybe the 70s, where it was really easy to start companies, there wasn't much competition and all the rest of it. We had a different kind of social mobility then. And people got a first mover advantage and they maintain it by being good at marketing, branding, or sales. So yes, you can do that. And I dare say, with the right budget, you could probably still do it these days in 2014. It'd be a lot harder than it was 40 years ago, but you probably could still give it a go and do it, I admit. However, it's the lazy way of doing it. What you really need to do is create a compelling point of difference and then brand it, market, and sell it better. So really, I say you've got to have both of those skills. And if you can combine the two of them, you're significantly better off. So I'd almost say don't be letting yourself off the hook. Be good at both of these. Success in business isn't easy, but it's attainable and all the answers are there for you. So don't take shortcuts, because we all know there is no real shortcut to success. If the real answer to succeeding in business was taking a shortcut, we'd all be taking the shortcut. The simple truth is, it's about the appreciation of the right business strategies and the correct, dedicated, long-term application. And that's all what we're showing you in this Business DNA program. So don't be tempted by shortcuts. They're very attractive, but they're not good for you. They're like cream cakes or something. They're there and they're tempting, but they're no good for you. They will not help you in the long run. So hopefully that answers that question for you. And that is the end of this week's video. We'll just jump over to next week's video, and I'll give you a little bit of an idea what we'll be doing next week. This is about the other side of this. Once you've got your target market, how you actually differentiate with customers and that sort of stuff. So this is quite an important module we're doing next week, so I'd suggest that you really apply the stuff by the time you watch it next week. Do it. Remember what I said in the opening video. The reason we give you one a week is because we're pushing you to do lots of work in a week. Because if I said, okay, this works hard, so let's do one a month, you'd never get around to doing it, and probably in 4 years' time we'd still be here and you still wouldn't have done it. So do push yourself to get everything done that we've given you until this week, because next week is a very interesting video about the right type of customer, the wrong type of customer, how you identify them, and what you do about that. So that's the end of today's video. Hopefully it's been useful. Hopefully it's been very practical. As you can see, I've not tried to give you theory or platitudes. I've tried to give you kind of raw, real-world business experience based on doing this with literally hundreds and hundreds of businesses. So hopefully that's something to give you the real-world element of the theory that we gave you last week. So as I say, apply this. Make sure you've got everything done by next week's video, and we'll speak then. So between now and then, have a fantastic time in business. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye for now.